For nearly 80 years, Marilee Scaff has hiked the Sierra Nevada mountains of California. Her favorite destination remains the giant sequoia groves. At age 95, her connection to nature seems undiminished, though she hikes with increasing difficulty. She wonders if her descendants will share her passion for wild places, and with good reason. The natural world is in decline, and many of its remaining treasures are threatened by growth in human population and consumption, and by the removal of more and more young people from outdoor activity in contact with natural systems. Children who think that milk comes from a grocery store are unlikely to grow up recognizing their dependence on pollinating insects, groundwater recharge, and plants that produce oxygen. Critics say that we live in a bubble of electronic self-absorption. They claim that people don't see nature anymore. They just drive right through it, or fly over it looking for the next crowded airport in which to land. It's not that we reject the beauty and serenity of wild places. It's just that our lives are no longer interwoven with the fabric of soil, trees, and wildlife. Steel and plastic have replaced natural landscapes in human settlements across the globe, though not without an occasional regret voiced about the price of progress. Biodiversity, this planet's greatest form of wealth, continues rapidly to decline. Humanity seems resigned to living with less of it, so that we can consume more of everything else. Wilderness is our most precious legacy. What we leave future generations in the way of wild places and healthy species will say more about our success as a civilization than all the cars and computers ever created. People need the enduring presence of wild creatures and untamed landscapes, even if they spend all of their time in crowded cities.
I think that sense of being a part of the natural world is something that becomes a part of one's human being very early. So for me, the enjoyment of the world is something I'd really like to share. The natural world is full of such magic. Just look at this. Simply a little flower off of a desert mallow, I think. The chlorophyll in those leaves is the reason you can live on Earth. That little plant can take minerals and water from the soil or from the rain and sunshine and turn them into sugars and starches and provide food for the plants, food for the animals, food for you, because everything that you eat on Earth is dependent on that kind of growth.
Our capacities to invent and conquer are altering life on Earth and creating an unprecedented crescendo of both power and extinction. We have become gods, or at least planetary engineers. But despite our success and the hubris it fosters, many of us long for encounters with something much greater than ourselves, something that is not itself a human artifact. Some would call this a spiritual hunger, others a fascination with the unknown. Perhaps it is the inevitable result of a nature deficit disorder. Or maybe it's a nostalgic impulse to return to a simpler time when there were wild frontiers to explore and civilization had not yet been seduced by the ideology of growth and mass consumption. The scale of life outdoors can teach us something important about our place in the universe. We may be alone in this galaxy and powerful enough to transform the Earth for the rest of human history. But as individuals, we are merely one of 7 billion people who share a fantasy of self-importance while living on a pale blue dot of a planet that is run by microbes. Yes, only our species can conquer Everest. But standing on a granite dome less than 5,000 feet high is all it takes to experience a surge of humility. Here, the chasm that separates human arrogance from nature's reality is revealed in all of its sobering grandeur. The longing to encounter life outside the realm of human design and control implies a need for wildness. Encounters with the wild usually occur in remote places and in moments of awe, when we experience a connection with life beyond our own species and that of our pet animals. This is where self-discovery flourishes, at the boundaries of identity that separate our species from those we call wild.
If you're camping, it makes an enormous amount of difference to you as to whether there's a full moon, because then you have light way on into the night. However, you also discover that on nights when the moon is down, the stars give enormous light. The dark is never truly dark. It always has light in it. I know a man who, as a child, was taught by an elder teacher in a camp to look at the stars and appreciate their light. And he says the next day he gave away his flashlight, and he's never used one since, because the night is not dark if you look carefully. There is always light in darkness. And that's a strange metaphor from the natural world to your life. Is there light in the dark experience? Is there light even when it seems dark? And I think if you live with the natural world, you develop a much deeper understanding of what life brings to you and what challenges it brings. Life has these very exciting and well-designed patterns. And they apply to people as well as to animals. And I think in the natural world, you see the life cycle of animals, of ants, of butterflies, of the lovely little chipmunk, and the adult, and then the moving on to some other life. And I think that people need to be well aware of the seasons of their own lives and learn not only to recognize them, but to accept them. We don't live forever. We have limited days. And so in those days, we try to apply our hearts to wisdom. Memories of beautiful places build your spirit to give you a sense of the significance of this great natural world and one's very small place in it.
We may marvel at wild places while on vacation, or when watching images of them briefly on television. But few of us live in these places or care to. Fewer still maintain a spiritual connection to the wild. John Muir said that the clearest way into the universe is through a forest wilderness. But people today can access images of distant galaxies on the internet without ever leaving their house or classroom. They often know more about outer space than the biological space they occupy on Earth. Even as science discovers new and vastly complex connections in the great web of life, most people direct their attention to the single strand that links humans with their pets, or with commodities extracted from living natural resources, such as beef or timber. Today's preoccupation with material consumption and indoor living does seem to be contributing to a nature deficit disorder. But it could also be said that nature is suffering from a human deficit disorder. Certainly not in terms of human population size. Rather, the deficit stems from the declining percentage of people who spend significant time communing with nature.
The nicest thing for me is to go out among the wildflowers, and I take special interest in all of the flowers that are native to any given area.
Rocks can be as wild and beautiful as flowers. For Marilee Scaff, they were an important part of her childhood. In the 1920s, she visited remote canyons carved by the mighty Colorado River and its tributaries.
It was mind-boggling to see the scale of the canyons and the rivers that sculpted them over millions of years. The beauty of that river-washed, wind-blown countryside held me in awe. On some of the walls, you could find ancient petroglyphs showing the fascination of the early humans who lived here and the animals they saw. And you thought about those people walking over this land, walking over these thousands of miles of open land. You really can't be in places like this and not feel some kind of spiritual connection. Even as a child, I could sense a spirit of place in these red rock canyons.
Many people have lost their spirit of place, whether in wilderness or in their own community. This lack of engagement in a bioregion or cultural landscape weakens our connection with nature and our understanding of interdependence. It makes it harder to create sustainable communities, both human and non-human.
Early Native Americans regarded foxes and certain other animals as dream helpers, spirits that revealed important insights through dreams that connected human and non-human experience. Today, our dreams are disconnected, and our dream helpers are mostly pharmaceutical products. Perhaps we need to rediscover our relationship with wild animals. Perhaps we need better dreams. Aspens in autumn can almost take your breath away, their golden leaves trembling in the last warm breeze of the season. We should fear the day when humans witness such splendor and fail to be moved. Perhaps it is in such riveting moments of beauty that we allow our senses to be overwhelmed and our capacity for enchantment to emerge. Where else but amidst the grand scale of wilderness can feelings of insignificance be welcome and comforting? Our sense of wonder is what frees us to discover in these joyful moments the spirit of place.
One of the things that makes places so special is the memories you bring to them. Memories make life meaningful to all of us, I think. So how are you going to keep this planet being really accessible and beautiful and operating as an ecosystem for your great-great-great-great-grandchildren? And that is an issue that all of us ought to have in our mind every day. Every community and every individual needs to work at how to keep their world more sustainable.
In the vast workings of the biosphere, any one place on Earth can seem insignificant. But because they are all interconnected, each is uniquely valuable. The alkali flies that carpet the shoreline of Mono Lake in California provide the primary fuel for tens of thousands of phalaropes that annually migrate 3,000 miles in nonstop flight to Ecuador. The lowly fly becomes critically important when viewed in the context of food chains. Whether seas of grass or briny water, we must step lightly in these fragile places. They represent refuges not just for birds and other creatures. They are also refuges for human beings in search of solitude, beauty, and a haven from urban stress. Finding refuge in an overdeveloped world is getting harder. Even the vast wilderness we call the ocean is being tamed and exploited for human purposes. But more than enough remains to restore our spirits and bring us in touch with wildness. Experiencing places and creatures we do not control is part of what makes us whole. Such encounters are increasingly important for retaining our collective sanity and sense of wonder.
Alone in the forest, we discover the streams of beauty and tranquility that inspire our primal love of wild places. The greening of the human mind often begins with forest and streams. Here, even the snails and slugs are objects of fascination, raising and retracting their movable eyes on stalks. This is where our children can learn from tadpoles about the power of transformation. All ages can benefit from close encounters with nature. Places for these encounters need to be designed into our cities. But to immerse in wild places, we must leave our homes and comfort zones and undertake a long and quiet journey into the backcountry. Only there can we discover a world that is not the product of our thoughts. Some say that we don't inherit the earth from our parents, we borrow it from our children. The truth is that each generation inherits a reduced share of wilderness and a diminished spirit of place.
How do we regain our spirit of place and our sense of wonder about nature? The answer may lie in the relationship between beauty and fragility, as exemplified by a delicate flower or by tens of thousands of seabirds taking flight at sunset. What makes a beautiful sunset precious is in part the knowledge that it will not last. The same can be said about life, our own and that of all the creatures with which we share this planet. The beauty and fragility of life is like a bubble carried on the wind. With the right conditions, a bubble will soar across space and time, changing its shape, reaching for the sky, but always returning to Earth, usually in a burst of destruction. This delicate symbol of a transparent self represents the journey of our lives, sailing toward eternity. But like bubbles, our lives are fleeting and destined to end abruptly. The beauty of the world remains, but it is no longer viewable through the silvery lens of the bubble. Fortunately, new bubbles are born, each one a liquid enclosure of air through which we can glimpse fragments of our universe. It's hard to say which is more beautiful, the free-floating bubble in flight, or the shimmering face of nature we see when looking through its watery membrane. It is through such limited perspectives that we construct our reality. The beauty inside us is really the beauty outside, seen through the vapor-thin walls of our lives. Our connection to nature gives us the imagination to soar, but only for a split second of evolutionary time. The fleeting arc of our existence gives poignancy to the beauty we experience, and to our zeal to survive in the memories of those who will outlive us. During our journey on Earth, let us relish wild places and their amazing creatures. They give profound joy and meaning to our lives, and quiet dignity to the way they end.